There is a law operating in this universe that most people will never discover. Not because it is hidden in some ancient vault, or locked away in the libraries of secret societies, or guarded by the privileged few who have inherited wealth for generations, but because it is hidden in plain sight. It is hidden behind the very assumptions we carry about money, about God, about our own worth, and about the nature of reality itself. Florence Scovel Shinn spent her entire life trying to tear away the veil that keeps ordinary men and women from seeing this law. She wrote about it, she taught it, she demonstrated it in her own life, and she watched it transform the lives of thousands of people who dared to take her words seriously. And today, we are going to walk into the heart of this law together. We are going to do more than merely understand it intellectually. We are going to feel it, absorb it, and allow it to begin its quiet, powerful work inside us. The first thing you must understand, and this is where most people stumble before they have even taken a single step, is that prosperity is not a reward. Read that again, slowly, and let it land. Prosperity is not a reward. It is not something God dangles before you as compensation for years of suffering. It is not something the universe grants to the exceptional, the gifted, the educated, or the morally superior. Prosperity is a state of divine order. It is what happens when a person aligns their mind, their words, their beliefs, and their expectations with the infinite supply that has always existed, that exists right now, and that will always exist no matter what the newspapers say, no matter what the economy does, no matter what your bank statement currently reflects. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this with a clarity that was almost startling for her era. She lived and worked in New York during a time of tremendous financial upheaval. She watched the Great Depression devastate families, collapse businesses, and strip entire communities of their dignity. And yet, the people who came to her with trembling hands and desperate eyes, those who truly received her teaching and applied it, walked out of the very same depression into astonishing personal abundance. The world around them had not changed. The economy had not suddenly recovered. What had changed was something far deeper and far more real than any economic condition. What had changed was their relationship to the law. Now, when we talk about wealthy people following this law unknowingly, we must be careful about what we mean. We are not talking about every person with a large bank account. There are people who have accumulated tremendous wealth through cruelty, through manipulation, through the exploitation of others. That is not the prosperity Florence Scovel Shinn spoke of. That is not the prosperity this law produces. Shinn made a very sharp and important distinction. She distinguished between those who are merely rich and those who are truly prosperous. True prosperity, as she defined it, is wealth that arrives in divine order. It flows in, it stays, it multiplies, and it does not destroy. It does not come at the expense of your peace, your health, your relationships, or your integrity. And the people who possess this kind of wealth, whether they are aware of it or not, are operating in alignment with the hidden law. They may not call it by any spiritual name. They may not even believe in God or the universe in the way Shinn did. But somewhere in their mental and emotional makeup, they have stumbled into alignment. They think certain thoughts consistently. They speak in certain patterns. They hold certain expectations that, without realizing it, are perfect expressions of the law. Our task today is to make the unconscious conscious, to pull this law from the shadows where it has been operating silently in the lives of the prosperous, and to bring it fully into your awareness so that you can begin to work with it deliberately, powerfully, and without apology. The law itself can be stated simply, though its simplicity is deceptive. The law is this: your dominant inner expectation becomes your outer experience. That is it. That is the core of everything Shinn taught, everything the great prosperity teachers understood, everything the wealthy unknowingly practice. Your dominant inner expectation, not your wishes, not your prayers spoken once in desperation, not your vision board that you glance at occasionally, but the deep, settled, quiet expectation that lives beneath all your surface thoughts. The expectation that runs like a river beneath the soil of your conscious mind, unseen but constantly nourishing, or constantly eroding everything you attempt to grow. This expectation is what determines what comes to you and what passes you by. This is the law. And the moment you truly understand it, not just nod at it, but feel its weight and its reality in your gut, everything about how you approach your life will change. Florence Scovel Shinn called this inner expectation by many names at different times in her writings. Sometimes she called it faith. Sometimes she called it the word. Sometimes she spoke of it as the imaging faculty, the capacity of the human mind to hold a picture so clearly and so confidently that the invisible creative power of the universe had no choice but to make it visible. She was not speaking mystically, though her language was often poetic. She was speaking practically. She was describing a law as reliable and as impersonal as gravity. Gravity does not care whether you believe in it. It does not reward the righteous and punish the wicked. It simply operates. You can use it or you can fight it, but it will do exactly what it does, regardless of your opinion of it. The law of inner expectation is the same. It does not care whether you are a good person or a bad person, whether you attend religious services or have never prayed a single prayer. It operates through your dominant expectation with perfect consistency. This is why apparently undeserving people sometimes accumulate great wealth, while sincere, hardworking, genuinely virtuous people remain in lack. The law is not measuring virtue, it is responding to expectation. Now let us go deeper, because simply knowing that your expectation shapes your reality is not enough. The critical question is this: what shapes your expectation? And here is where Shinn's genius really begins to reveal itself. She taught that your expectation is primarily formed by your words. Not just the words you speak aloud, though those are enormously powerful, but the words that run continuously in the stream of your inner conversation. The things you say to yourself about money. The things you say to yourself about your own worth and capacity. The stories you repeat often unconsciously about why prosperity has never quite found you, about how people like you never really make it, about how money is always tight, always slipping away, always going to those who don't deserve it, while you who work so hard and try so faithfully are somehow always left behind. Shinn was ahead of her time in understanding the hypnotic power of these inner narratives. Every time you say, even silently, even half-heartedly, I can never get ahead, or money always runs out before the month does, or rich people are just lucky, or I don't deserve abundance, you are not merely expressing a feeling. You are issuing a command to the creative law within you. You are speaking your world into being and into limitation. The law hears the dominant message, which is your dominant expectation, and it faithfully manufactures the conditions that match it. This is not punishment. This is simply how the mechanism works. And this is why Shinn was so insistent about the power of affirmation, not as a positive thinking exercise designed to make you feel better momentarily, but as a genuine spiritual technology for reprogramming the expectation at the center of your being. She used to tell her students about the power of what she called the word of the Lord, the divine affirmation spoken in faith. She would give people specific words to repeat, specific phrases aligned with abundance and divine supply, and she would instruct them to speak these words with conviction, with consistency, and above all with the quiet certainty that the law was already responding. The words she gave were not random. They were precision instruments designed to cut through years of accumulated negative expectation and replace it with something new, something alive, something aligned with the infinite supply she knew was available to every person who would open their consciousness to receive it. The wealthy people who unknowingly follow this law do something that most people never do. They have developed what we might call a prosperity identity. They have, through experience, through upbringing, through deliberate mental habit, or sometimes, just through some fortunate combination of circumstances, arrived at a deep inner place where they expect good things to come to them. They expect opportunities to find them. They expect problems to have solutions. They expect that when one door closes, another will open. They expect that money will come. And because they expect it, they see it. Because they see it, they act on it. Because they act on it, they receive it. And because they receive it, their expectation is reinforced. It is a cycle, a glorious, self-sustaining cycle of alignment between inner world and outer experience. And Shinn's great gift to humanity was her insistence that this cycle could be broken into and entered at any point by any person, regardless of their history, their background, their current circumstances, or their past failures. You do not have to wait until you feel prosperous to begin thinking and speaking as a prosperous person. This was one of the most radical and liberating things Shinn ever taught. The world tells you to feel it when you see it. The law tells you to feel it in order to see it. The world says, believe it when it happens. The law says, believe it before it happens, and your belief is the very thing that causes it to happen. This is why Shinn instructed her students to give thanks for blessings they had not yet visibly received. This was not denial of reality. She was never asking anyone to pretend that their bills were paid when they were not, or to claim they had food when the cupboard was empty. She was asking something far more sophisticated. She was asking them to shift their expectation at the level where reality is actually created in the invisible realm of consciousness before the physical evidence had yet appeared. Because she knew, with the certainty of someone who had watched it happen hundreds of times, that the invisible always precedes the visible. The inner always precedes the outer. The thought, the word, the expectation always comes before the manifestation. Think for a moment about the language of truly prosperous people, not the way they speak publicly, performing confidence for an audience, but the way they speak casually, privately, reflexively. Listen, and you will notice something striking. They rarely speak of lack without immediately pivoting to possibility. They say, things like that is a significant expense, but we will find a way. They say, I do not have the money for that right now, but I am creating it. They say, this deal fell through, but the right one is coming. These are not just motivational phrases. These are unconscious expressions of a prosperity identity that has been built up over years of expectation aligned with abundance. These people are not more intelligent than you. They are not more spiritual than you. They are not more deserving of good than you. They have simply, somewhere along the way, developed the inner habit of expecting their needs to be met, of expecting supply to appear, of expecting the universe to cooperate with their desires. And the law, being the perfectly impartial, perfectly responsive mechanism that it is, has consistently met their expectation with corresponding outer experience. Now here is something Shinn taught that almost nobody talks about, something that is absolutely essential to understanding why this law works the way it does, and why so many people who sincerely want to be prosperous remain in lack despite their best efforts. Shinn said that the subconscious mind, what she often referred to as the soul, cannot be fooled by what you know intellectually. It can only respond to what you feel and believe at its level. This is why simply reading about prosperity laws, listening to teachings like this one, studying the principles, filling notebooks with affirmations you do not really believe, why none of that, by itself, produces lasting change. Information alone does not transform the subconscious expectation. What transforms it is a new feeling, held consistently, combined with new words, spoken with genuine conviction. The change has to go all the way down. It has to penetrate past the surface of intellectual agreement, past the shallow level of yes, that makes sense, down to the bedrock level of your being where your true expectations live. Shinn often spoke of what she called the Christ within the divine self, the higher self, the part of you that is made in the image and likeness of infinite supply. She taught that this divine self within you has no consciousness of lack whatsoever. It knows only abundance. It knows only wholeness. It knows only the perfect provision of every need before the need is even fully formed. The problem is that most people spend their entire lives operating from their carnal mind, their surface, reactive, fear-based mind that is constantly adding up what is missing, constantly reminding them of what they lost, constantly projecting past failures into future predictions of continued lack. And this carnal mind shouts so loudly that the quiet voice of the Christ within the voice of abundance, of perfect supply, of divine expectation can barely be heard. The great spiritual work, as Shinn taught it, is not to manufacture prosperity from nothing. It is to quiet the carnal mind enough that the divine supply which is already your birthright can begin to flow through you unobstructed. This is why prayer, in Shinn's understanding, was not begging. It was not a desperate appeal to a distant God who might or might not decide to help depending on how sincerely you pleaded. Prayer, for Shinn, was alignment. It was the deliberate act of turning your consciousness away from the evidence of lack and toward the truth of divine supply. It was the practice of speaking to the law, the invisible creative power, with the authority of someone who knows what they are doing and knows what they deserve. She taught people to pray not from weakness but from dominion. Not please God, if it be your will, send me enough to pay my rent, but I give thanks that my supply is unlimited, that divine substance is now taking form as the money I need, that what appears to be lacking is already made whole in the divine mind and is now visibly manifesting in my world. This is a completely different posture. This is the posture of alignment rather than supplication. And the law responds to alignment with absolute fidelity. Shinn also taught her students about what she called the power of the spoken decree. This goes beyond ordinary prayer or even affirmation. A decree is a declaration of spiritual authority, a statement made not from the position of a petitioner hoping to receive mercy, but from the position of a child of God exercising their divine birthright. Shinn believed that every human being carried within them the authority to decree a thing and see it established. She drew this teaching directly from Scripture, specifically from the ancient text that declares, "Thou shalt also decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee." She believed these were not merely poetic words. They were literal instructions for how spiritual law operates. When you decree something, when you speak it with settled, unshakable authority, when you claim it as already yours. In the invisible realm, you set the law in motion in a way that ordinary, wishing, or hoping never can. The decree is the expression of the prosperity identity at its fullest and most powerful. And this is precisely what the wealthy unknowingly practice in their reflexive inner confidence. They decree things. They may not call it by that name, they may not understand the spiritual mechanics behind it, but when they say, either aloud or within themselves, this will work out, there will be enough, the opportunity will come, they are speaking a decree, and the law moves. Let us talk now about one of the most powerful and least understood aspects of this hidden law, the role of generosity. Shinn was emphatic on this point, and it runs so counter to the scarcity-minded thinking that dominates most people's approach to money that it deserves very careful attention. She taught that the universe, the divine creative law, is governed by circulation. Supply flows in, but it must also flow out. When a person clings to what they have out of fear, when they hoard, when they refuse to give, when they make every financial decision from the assumption that there is not enough, and therefore every penny must be protected and held tightly, they actually stop the flow. They create, with their fear and their grasping, a kind of dam in the river of divine supply. The water backs up behind the dam, stagnates, and eventually the river finds other channels. The supply that was meant for them begins to flow around them and to those who have kept their channels open through trust and generosity. Now, before anyone misunderstands this principle, let us be very clear about what Shinn meant. She was not talking about giving from fear. She was not talking about giving because some preacher told you that if you send your last $50 to their ministry, God will send you $500 in return. That kind of transactional, anxiety-driven giving is still operating from lack. It is still making decisions from the assumption that the universe is stingy and has to be manipulated into providing. That kind of giving produces, at best, a temporary psychological lift, and at worst, a deeper sense of resentment and lack. What Shinn was describing was something entirely different. She was talking about giving from a place of inner abundance, giving because you have deeply accepted, at the level of genuine feeling, that divine supply is inexhaustible, that there is always more. that as you let go of what you have in faith and in joy, the divine law immediately begins to fill the space with fresh supply. This is giving as an act of faith in the law, not as an attempt to manipulate the law. And when it is done from this inner place of genuine trust and genuine abundance consciousness, it is one of the most powerful catalysts for increasing prosperity that Shinn, or anyone else, ever discovered. The wealthy people who follow this law unknowingly are often remarkably generous, not because they feel obligated to give, not because they are performing generosity for social approval, but because somewhere inside them, they have an unshakable sense that there will always be more. They give easily, almost casually, because the idea of running out does not really occur to them. They tip generously. They invest without agonizing. They share ideas, contacts, and opportunities with others, without the fear that somehow giving something to someone else diminishes what they have. And the law, true to its nature, reads this inner posture of abundance and reflects abundance back to them in an unending stream. Meanwhile, the person who counts every penny, who gives reluctantly or not at all, who analyzes every expenditure through the lens of scarcity and fear, the law reads their inner posture of lack and reflects lack back to them with equal consistency. The law is not judging either person. It is simply being what it is, a mirror. There is another dimension of this law that Shinn returned to again and again, and it is perhaps the most confronting aspect of her teaching for many people. She taught that resentment of the wealthy is one of the most devastating blocks to personal prosperity that exists. When you look at someone who has abundance and you feel anger, jealousy, bitterness, or contempt, when you tell yourself that they do not deserve what they have, or that they must have gotten it through dishonest means, or that it is unfair that they should have so much, when you have so little you are, without knowing it, placing a barrier between yourself and the very thing you desire. Because the law is not responding to your words about prosperity. It is responding to your dominant feeling about it. And if your dominant feeling when you encounter prosperity in someone else is resentment and contempt, you are telling the law in the most emphatic possible terms that prosperity is something you reject, something that makes you angry, something that does not feel good to you. And the law, ever faithful, ensures that it does not come near you. Shinn was direct about this, sometimes uncomfortably so. She told people that they had to genuinely celebrate the prosperity of others if they wanted to attract prosperity to themselves. Not fake celebration, not the performance of happiness through gritted teeth, but genuine, open-hearted appreciation for the fact that someone else's abundance was proof of the law's operation, proof that prosperity was real and available, proof that the divine supply was flowing and could flow to anyone who aligned with it. When you can look at someone else's beautiful home, their thriving business, their overflowing financial life, and feel genuine joy, not envy, not comparison, not self-pity, but real, warm appreciation, you are sending a signal to the creative law within you that prosperity feels wonderful to you, that you welcome it, that you celebrate it, and that you are ready to receive it in your own life. This shift in feeling, when it is genuine, can produce astonishing results with a speed that defies rational explanation. It is important here to understand something about the mechanics of the inner world that Shinn taught with remarkable precision. She said that every feeling you hold in your heart is a prayer, and the law is always listening, always responding, always manifesting the dominant emotional frequency into physical form. Most people think they are praying when they kneel down and speak certain words. But Shinn knew that the true prayer, the prayer the law actually hears and responds to, is the unspoken emotional atmosphere that surrounds a person every waking hour. A person who worships every week but carries a constant inner atmosphere of resentment, scarcity, and fear is not praying for prosperity. They are praying for the continuation of the conditions that produce resentment, scarcity, and fear. And the law answers that prayer with perfect faithfulness. Conversely, a person who may never enter a church or speak a formal prayer, but who walks through life in a settled, easy, joyful sense of sufficiency and expectation, that person is praying for abundance every moment of every day. And the law answers that prayer too, with equal faithfulness. This is not a system that rewards religiosity. It is a system that responds to consciousness. And the great liberating truth is that your consciousness is yours to change. Let us speak now about divine timing, because this is an aspect of the law that many people misunderstand in ways that cause them enormous unnecessary suffering. Shinn was a firm believer in what she called divine timing, the understanding that the creative law does not operate according to our impatient human schedules. There is a right time for every blessing, a right moment for every demonstration of supply, and the universe knows what that moment is, even when we cannot see it from where we stand. The challenge for the person who is genuinely practicing alignment with this law is to hold their inner posture of expectation without allowing the delay between the invisible and the visible to erode their faith. Because this is where most people give up. They speak the words, they shift their expectation, they begin to feel the inner movement of something changing, and then they wait, and they wait. And the physical evidence does not immediately appear. And the carnal mind, with its endless talent for doubt, begins to whisper that it is not working, that they were foolish to believe it, that this is just wishful thinking, that nothing ever really changes for people like them, and in that moment of wavering, they undo much of the work they have done. Not because the universe is punishing them for doubt, but because the doubt is itself a form of expectation, an expectation that it is not working, that it will not come, that they will be disappointed again. And the law, faithful as always, begins to reflect that expectation instead. Shinn taught her students to develop what she called divine indifference to outer appearances. Not indifference to the problem itself, not pretending it was not there, but a trained refusal to allow the outer appearance of lack to alter the inner reality of expectation. She would tell people, the demonstration is already made in the invisible. Do not let the delay in its physical appearance convince you otherwise. Stand firm in your word. Hold your image. Keep your expectation clear and bright and full of conviction, and the law will bring through what the law has already set in motion. This is precisely what the wealthy, who unknowingly follow this law, do with their setbacks and their delays. They experience financial difficulties. Every person who has ever built genuine prosperity has experienced significant financial difficulties. They face lost investments, failed ventures, unexpected expenses, periods of genuine hardship. But the thing that distinguishes them from those who remain in permanent lack is this: they do not let the temporary outer appearance of difficulty alter their fundamental inner expectation of success and supply. They look at the setback and they say, sometimes almost instinctively, this is temporary. The tide always turns. I have come back before, and I will come back again. There is a way through this, and I will find it. That inner declaration, made not as performance but as genuine belief, keeps the channel open. It keeps the law working in their favor even through the difficult seasons. And inevitably, often with a swiftness that surprises even them, the tide does turn, the supply does flow, the next opportunity does appear, and their expectation is reinforced once again. Shinn also taught something that is particularly important for those who approach prosperity from a religious or spiritual framework, that abundance is God's will for you. Not poverty, not lack, not just enough, abundance. She was unequivocal on this point, and she backed it with scripture at every turn. She believed that the universe, which she understood as the infinite intelligence of God in expression, was not a reluctant provider who had to be coerced into giving. It was an eager, overflowing source of supply that was constantly pressing toward any consciousness open enough to receive it. She used the image of a great river pressing against a dam. The river does not have to be convinced to flow. The river is already flowing, already full, already pressing with everything it has against whatever is blocking it. The only question is whether we will remove the dam we ourselves have built with our fears, our doubts, our resentments, and our limiting beliefs, and let the river through. And what is this dam made of? Shinn was specific. She said the dam is made of fear in all its forms, the fear that there is not enough, the fear that you will be left out, the fear that God does not really care about you specifically, the fear that you are somehow unworthy of abundance, the fear of other people's judgment if you succeed, the fear of responsibility that comes with wealth, the fear of losing what you gain, the fear of being seen, the fear of wanting too much. Every one of these fears is a brick in the dam. And every affirmation spoken in genuine faith, every act of trust, every moment of genuine gratitude, every choice to celebrate another person's prosperity, every decision to give generously from your abundance consciousness, each of these removes a brick. And as the bricks come out, the river flows more freely. And as the river flows more freely, the outer conditions of your life begin to change in ways that can seem almost miraculous, but are simply the law operating without obstruction. One of the most profound stories Shinn told in her teachings was about a woman who came to her desperate, unable to pay her rent, with what seemed like no possible avenue of supply. Shinn did not give her money. She gave her words. She gave her an affirmation, a specific declaration of truth about divine supply, and she instructed the woman to speak it with faith, to hold the inner picture of her need being met, and to expect the supply to come through some unexpected channel. Within days, from a source that had seemed completely dried up and exhausted, the money appeared. Not through the channels the woman had been desperately pursuing, but through a completely unexpected avenue that she could not have predicted or manufactured through her own effort. This was not coincidence. This was the law in operation. The dam removed just enough to let the river through, the inner expectation of supply, finally strong enough to attract the outer condition of supply. Shinn never tired of this kind of story because she had seen it too many times to dismiss it as coincidence. She had watched the law operate with a reliability and a precision that was, to her, the greatest possible evidence of the reality of divine intelligence. The law was always working. The supply was always pressing against the dam. The only variable was the consciousness of the individual, their expectation, their words, their inner posture of faith or fear. And because these things could be changed, because consciousness is the one thing in your life over which you have absolute sovereignty, she knew that prosperity was genuinely available to anyone. Not as a distant hope, not as a maybe someday, but as an immediately available divine reality that needed only your aligned consciousness to become your immediate physical experience. But there is yet another layer to this hidden law that must be addressed, because without it, the picture remains incomplete. Shinn taught that the law operates not just through expectation and words, but through what she called right action, the intuitive guidance that begins to flow naturally when a person's consciousness is properly aligned. When your inner world is in order, when your expectation is right, and your words are aligned with that expectation, you will begin to notice something new happening. Ideas will come to you that did not come before. Impulses will arise, gentle, persistent nudges toward specific actions, specific people, specific opportunities. A thought to call someone you have not spoken to in months. An impulse to walk down a different street, to attend a certain gathering, to pursue a certain project that logic might dismiss as impractical. These nudges are the language of the law. They are the universe drawing you, step by step, through the invisible pathways that connect your inner expectation to its outer manifestation. The wealthy people who unknowingly follow this law are almost universally described by those who know them well, as people who trust their instincts, who follow their gut, who act on hunches that others would dismiss. They have learned through experience and reinforcement to trust the gentle inner guidance that the law sends them. And every time they follow that guidance and it leads to something good, their trust deepens, their alignment strengthens, and the guidance becomes more accurate and more frequent. This is what the world calls good luck, but it is not luck. It is the natural result of a consciousness in alignment with the law, receiving and acting on the intuitive directions that the law provides. Shinn called this stepping off on the right foot, the practice of beginning every new venture, every new day, every new relationship by aligning your consciousness first, and then waiting for the inner sense of rightness before you move. Not paralysis, not endless waiting, but the brief, powerful pause of alignment before action, so that when you do move, you move with the whole force of the law behind you, rather than against you. There is one final truth about this hidden law that must be spoken, before we can bring this teaching to its close, and it is perhaps the most humbling truth of all. Shinn taught that the law cannot be permanently deceived. You can manipulate your words and your outer behavior for a season. You can speak abundance while feeling lack, and the genuine prosperity you create will be limited and short-lived. Because what you genuinely feel at the level of your being is always more powerful than what you perform at the level of your surface behavior. The law reads the soul, not the script. This is why the work of genuine prosperity is ultimately a work of the spirit, a work of inner transformation, of genuinely changing what you feel about money, about God, about yourself, about your worth, and your right to receive the abundance that was prepared for you before the foundation of the world. When that transformation happens, when the change goes all the way down to the root of your expectation, the outer change is not just possible, it is inevitable, it is a law. So what must you do with all of this? What is the practical application of this hidden law in your daily life, beginning right now, beginning today? The first thing is the most important, and it is the hardest. You must get honest with yourself about your dominant expectation around money and abundance. Not what you wish you believed, not what you know intellectually to be true about prosperity, but what you actually, honestly, at the deepest level of your feeling nature, expect. Because that expectation is your current reality, and it will continue to be your future reality until you change it. If you sit quietly and notice the running commentary that plays in the back of your mind about money, and you notice that it is largely a stream of worry, of calculation, of comparison, of resentment, of feelings of unworthiness or limitation, then that is the expectation that the law is currently fulfilling. That is the dam you are working with, and knowing where the dam is the beginning of removing it. The second thing is to choose new words deliberately and consistently. Not just once, not when you feel like it, but as a daily, committed practice. Shinn recommended specific affirmations because she knew that the subconscious mind responds to repetition and to the emotional charge behind words. Choose words that resonate with you, that feel true to you at some level even if they do not yet feel completely natural. Words like divine supply is flowing to me now, and I am grateful. Or I am aligned with infinite abundance and it is finding expression in my life. Or there is always more than enough, and I am receiving my divine portion with joy. Speak these words aloud if you can. Speak them with as much genuine feeling as you can access. And speak them not to try to convince a reluctant universe, but to reprogram your own expectation, to shift the signal you are sending to the creative law within you. The third thing is to practice genuine gratitude, not the performance of gratitude, but the actual feeling of it. Find, every single day, things in your current experience that are evidence of supply, of provision, of the law already working in your life. The meal you just ate, the air you are breathing, the fact that you are here, that you are learning, that you are alive and conscious and capable of change. Let these things genuinely move you. Because gratitude, real gratitude, is one of the most powerful aligning forces that exists. It says to the law, "This is what I want more of. This is the frequency I am choosing to live at." And the law, always faithful, always precise, always responsive, answers with more of the same. The fourth thing, perhaps the most powerful and most counterintuitive of all, is to begin to give. Give from whatever you have. Give with joy, give with trust, give with the inner knowing that as your hand opens to release, the divine supply that has been pressing against your dam will begin to flow through the new opening you have created. Give a larger tip than you feel you can afford. Give your time generously to someone who needs it. Give away something you have been hoarding against a rainy day. Give a genuine compliment, a real piece of yourself, something that costs you something, and do it with the inner declaration, "I give freely, because I live in a universe of infinite supply. As I give, I open myself to receive. The law is working, and I trust it completely." And the fifth thing, the thing that binds all the others together, is this: decide, today, to become a student of this law in your own life. Begin to notice the correlation between what you have been expecting inwardly and what you have been experiencing outwardly. Begin to catch yourself in the act of speaking the language of lack, and deliberately, calmly, without self-condemnation, redirect your words and your expectations toward abundance. Begin to watch for the intuitive nudges, the unexpected ideas, the small and large synchronicities that begin to appear when you are genuinely aligned. Keep a record of the demonstrations, large and small, the parking space that appeared, the unexpected refund, the phone call that came with exactly the right offer at exactly the right time. These are not accidents. They are the law speaking to you in a language you are learning to read. And the more fluent you become in this language, the richer, the more extraordinary, and the more unmistakably divine your outer experience will become. This is the hidden law of prosperity that wealthy people unknowingly follow. It is not about strategy, though strategy has its place. It is not about intelligence, though intelligence is useful. It is not about luck, though what the world calls luck is often just the law operating in the life of someone whose consciousness is aligned. It is about expectation. It is about words. It is about the inner posture of a human being who has decided, consciously or unconsciously, to align themselves with the infinite supply that Florence Scovel Shinn spent her entire remarkable life teaching us is our divine birthright. You were not created for lack. You were not born into this world to struggle and scrape and count pennies and wonder if there will be enough. You were created by and from an infinite source, and that source has never once run dry. The river is full. It has always been full. It will always be full. The only question that has ever mattered is whether your dam is up or your dam is coming down. Whether your consciousness is closed in fear or open in faith. Whether your words are building the wall higher or dismantling it, stone by stone, with the patient, powerful, love-fueled certainty that the supply of God is unlimited, that it is yours, that it is here, that it is flowing, and that nothing in heaven or on earth has the power to withhold from you the abundance that is written into the very fabric of your divine nature. The law is not far from you. It is not waiting for you to become better, richer, smarter, or more deserving. It is waiting for you to open. It is pressing against your dam right now, in this moment, with more force and more love and more provision than you have ever dared to imagine was meant for you. All you have to do, the only thing you have ever had to do, is let it through. Speak the word, hold the expectation, trust the law, and watch what happens.